start us by calling the roll, please?
Yes, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of the Commission, I will now call roll. Sandy Rowe,
Here.
Greg Heyman,
Present.
Natalie Arnott, Rachel Biscoe, Richard Devlin,
Present.
Helen Edwards, Arnel Fajardo, Evelyn Coker, Teresa Martinez.
Someone needs to mute.
Yep, just a moment. Let me see. Jen Proctor Andrews, Mary Middleton, Emily Simnett,
Present.
Mototama Sapelli, Jennifer Smith,
Here.
Gail Yamasaki.
Here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is roll. We have a quorum, and if any members joined while I was calling roll, I will update them for the minutes.
Yes, I think we're expecting, what, 3 or 4 more, Guthrie?
Yes.
Well, we are going to start off this morning on a happy note, thanks to Guthrie. Mr. Guthrie, Mr. Stafford, will you please give us your news flash?
Yes, I was married last Saturday. May it be immortalized in the public record of the HECC.
Absolutely. That's why I waited till. That's so great. She's lovely. Tell us a little bit, those who haven't met her. Just name.
Yes.
How long y'all have been together?
Her name is Angelina Stafford now. We've been together for 3 years. She's an OSU alum, a member of the Oregon National Guard, and currently going to the OHSU PSU Public Health Administration program.
Congratulations to all. That's a wonderful bit of news. Thank you, Guthrie. Okay, on the agenda, as you see, we don't have as look at the heart, as long an agenda as we sometimes do, but it is packed. We have coming up the first review we've had of the regional and PSU sustainability funding and what's happening with that. We, of course, have the legislative update. We're still in the heat of the legislature. We had asked previously and now have, I think, a very good update from staff on the BS in Nursing Consortium and sort of the larger meaning of that and potential for the future of that. And Greg and I are going to give an update on the visits we had at all of the community colleges and the universities and sort of a summary of what we saw there and then some conclusions also that we're drawing from those collective visits. So I will get us started, but it's a full agenda. First up, of course, is the minutes. Are there any questions or changes to the minutes? If not, can we have a motion to approve, please?
I move to approve the minutes.
And I see a second. I think it was Commissioner Devlin. Thank you very much. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Or raise your hand. Thank you.
Aye.
Minutes Thank you. Minutes are approved. Ben, you are next up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Rowe, for being a shorter meeting and a smaller materials packet. It nevertheless sounds dense when you describe the highlights for the next few hours. So again, really appreciate commissioners making the volunteer time available today and your ongoing service to the commission and to the state. I don't take that for granted. I'll just note we are very fortunate that this commission is fully appointed. It has been for a while. We don't have any vacant seats currently, and we've had pretty good meeting attendance. So unlike some commissions and state boards and commissions that can struggle even to generate a quorum and get their work done. We've just been exceptionally fortunate in your commitment to robust participation and attendance at commission meetings. So thank you. Um, I will cover briefly, I think, 5 items. The first is just to note, as is typical, there is in your meeting packets, in connection with my executive director report, a summary of our current spending against the legislatively adopted budget for the current 2-year period, the 2023-25 biennium. We are nearing the end of that biennium, and what this tracker generally shows is that we are within the budgeted amounts for the agency. So our expenditures are running about where they should be. And of course, we monitor that very closely as we near the end of the biennium, since one of my and the agency's foremost responsibilities is not to overspend the appropriations that the legislature has made to us. And while I think we will come very close to spending all of the funds, particularly in that general funds category, we will not overspend. That is certainly the case. So if there are any questions, of course, feel free to follow up with me or with our operations team afterward. Moving on. You started on a positive and happy note. I will begin substantively with one of the with a challenge that we've experienced over the last month, which was the announcement we received on April 25th from the federal AmeriCorps agency that our grant, our AmeriCorps state service grant, the HECC operates as the State Service Commission and agency for AmeriCorps state programs. We learned on April 25th that the federal agency was immediately terminating that grant and therefore expected us to notify our portfolio of grantees, 9 organizations in Oregon with about 150 paid AmeriCorps members working with them, that they were to immediately exit the program. We immediately, like within that hour on a Friday afternoon, began working with the Oregon Governor's Office and the Oregon Department of Justice to determine next steps. We did not direct our grantees to close their work or exit their members from the program. We instead have worked with the Department of Justice to support a multi-state lawsuit. A preliminary injunction was a motion for a preliminary injunction was filed with a federal district court in Maryland yesterday, seeking a preliminary injunction on that federal action, which our states, the states that are in this lawsuit, believe was unlawful. So unfortunately, organizations that are grantees, and this is about $3 million that would be affected, are in a difficult position of having to determine whether to continue to keep their members employed and at work, even with funding at risk, depending on the outcome of this lawsuit, or whether to wind up work. And so, again, we have not issued any direction one way or the other, but we recognize that they are having to make that risk calculation on their own. This action, as well as any other federal action that affects the HECC, we are describing at our website. There's within the kind of news and information section of our website, we've created a web page where we're keeping track of and sharing any direct federal impacts that we've experienced as they happen. So you won't find much more information than I've shared on that website, but certainly if you are interested in following this or any other federal action as it occurs, that's the place to do so. Or of course, feel free to be in touch with me. Turning to, and I just want to acknowledge, so Carrie Bauer is the HECC staffer who leads our small AmeriCorps team. There's 3 or 4 staff in our agency who are working directly to support our grantees and the AmeriCorps volunteers, and she and her team their world has been turned upside down over the last month. That was actually preceded, that termination notice from the federal government was preceded by the DOGE-related termination of the vast majority of the roughly 600 staff at the federal agency. That too has had a major impact on our office. So their world's been turned upside down. They are working very, very hard to support our grantees as well as the AmeriCorps members who are working in Oregon on projects from environmental restoration to housing case management, to tutoring, college access, summer bridge programs. And there's a lot of really good work going on. And they're working very closely with the Department of Justice in support of this legal action that we're taking. Okay, shifting gears somewhat, happier news. The Oregon Promise program that we administer through OSAC for students who are finishing high school or GED and interested in going to community college, that program is seeing its second or maybe third year of pretty significant application increases coming out of the now high school class or GED class of 2025. We are up 14% in those applications based on this point last year for the high school class of 2024, and that 2024 class was a significant increase over 2023. So these are record numbers. These are actually these exceed pre-pandemic numbers at this point. And it's not altogether clear what is driving this. In some ways, it seems to fly in the face of some other sort of trends, the sort of national narrative around higher education and concerns about value, the FAFSA challenges that were widely publicized last year and have likely inhibited some college going, or at least some financial aid applications. So really pleased to see this increase in applications. It may be due in part to the exceptional outreach efforts that our staff are working with partners around the state on, including high schools, efforts on the parts of high schools themselves to encourage and support students in applying for the grant. Perhaps the increasing attractiveness of community colleges as an option for recent high school students, given their relative affordability or proximity or flexibility. So hypothesis at this point about what may be driving this. I will note it also flies in the face of last year's cap that we put on eligibility for this program, which is designed in law to be a universal benefit to any graduating high school senior who meets the GPA requirements and enrolls at least half time in a community college. Last year, as a result of increased demand, and limited budget, we had to cap eligibility based on need. We were not qualifying the lowest need or highest income students. It appears again this year, for the same reason, we will place a cap, which we have currently published an estimated eligibility cap of 18,000 in the Student Aid Index, which translates to roughly, this is very approximate, roughly an average a family income of about $120,000, meaning students from families with SAIs greater than 18,000, which is perhaps, it depends on family size and other characteristics, but perhaps families with incomes greater than 120,000 will not be eligible for the promise, barring some increase to the legislative appropriation, which we don't yet have, or other changes in application rates or enrollment rates. So still, positive story. We've got quite a bit of interest in college coming from the high school class of 2025, and that is certainly a good thing. A couple more items. More good news. I think I mentioned to you at the last meeting that the HECC annually, our staff participate in the statewide governor-led food drive that all state agencies are encouraged to participate in, and we make donations through payroll or through credit card donations. And I think as a result primarily of Guthrie's exceptional email reminders to staff that he put together throughout the month of March, we placed second in the state for the number of meals donated per employee from our agency. Little caveat there, we're not quite in the state. I guess it's in our category of medium-sized state agencies. But nevertheless, like really awesome. We raised, this was 133 meals per employee that we donated, raised almost $9,000 through the drive. We didn't hit our really aspirational target of getting 75% of HECC employees to participate, but we came pretty close, and certainly boosted our numbers considerably over last year. So HECC staff are generous, they're caring, they're kind, and they showed up for Oregonians in need in March. And that is really exciting to report. Finally, I'll just mention earlier this week, I was in Utah for the twice annual Western Interstate Commission on Higher Education Commission meeting. That is WICHE, Western Interstate Commission on Higher Education. That's the acronym. It brings together, the commission meetings bring together leaders from throughout, higher ed leaders from throughout the West, including typically the folks in my role, plus other governor appointed members, up to 3 per state. And it's, we are the board for this organization that provides services and policy leadership for higher education in the West. But it's such a dynamic time in higher education. Certainly valuable to connect with other states and other higher education leaders. I participated on one of 2 plenary sessions discussing a report that the National Conference of State Legislators issued last year, and I'll put a link in the chat in a couple of minutes. It's a report titled Leveraging a State-Federal Partnership to Enhance Post-Secondary Affordability and Impact Student Outcomes. And this was a task force. NCSL is a bipartisan group of legislators from around the country. It represents legislators from around the country. And this task force was bipartisan, members from over 30 states. It was co-chaired by former State Senator Michael Dembrow and Utah State Senator Ann Milner. Senator Milner from Utah and I were on this panel at WICHE, really talking about the report and its consequences for U.S. higher education. And I mean, what's abundantly clear is that at this very moment, there appears to be, at least in my view, considerably diminished opportunity for a constructive state-federal partnership in the short term. With states and higher education really on the defensive relative to federal action in higher education, it's challenging to imagine a constructive partnership. But it was heartening to read this report that came out a year ago. It came out in the fall. But it was begun in 2022. It was certainly heartening to read the way in which these state legislators from around the country at that time, Republican and Democrat, blue states, red states, really share some established and reaffirm some principles about the state role in higher education, the federal role in higher education. And one of them, and probably the most important, is the notion that in higher education in the US, the state has the plenary or primary role. The federal role is complementary, should be additive. Legislators agreed that the federal government, while it has considerable interest in and responsibility for higher education, given its funding role through Pell and through other grant making, that it should have any action it takes in support of accountability, for example, should be modest and should be in alignment with state goals. And so again, in front of this, or with this sort of bipartisan group of leaders from around the West, it was helpful, I think, to reaffirm some of the principles that we have for the federal role in particular, and to reaffirm that the state role is and should be primary. And along those lines, final thing I'll say is just draw your attention to the statement that I put out in our last newsletter. I think you should all be on the distribution list, but the opening statement that also articulates the importance of ensuring that our higher education systems, our higher education institutions are protected from inappropriate levels of government, federal government interference and oversight in order to maintain the values of independence, of academic freedom, of control of curriculum, teaching, learning, hiring, etc. And so I think it's a moment in time where those principles that many of us, I think, have taken for granted, because that's the way it's been in American higher education, are worth restating. And with that, I will conclude my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Greg, you have a question?
Sure. Just a quick one. Ben, do we know anything about the economic need categories that are represented in the influx of applicants for the Oregon Promise?
No, I haven't seen that analysis, and in fact, I doubt we have it, because we're still collecting the FAFSAs. The full Oregon Promise application includes a very short application to us, and we combine that with the FAFSA application or ORSA application, and that is a required component of the Oregon, and that's what will tell us the student need. And I have not seen that data, but I'll inquire about that, and it'll be interesting to evaluate how that has changed over time, if at all.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Ben, what do we know, if anything? What's the latest on Pell and how much they're going to try to change it?
Very good question. A lot of discussion about that this week in Utah, and over the last couple of weeks since the release of a U.S. House Republican plan for higher education that would include significant cuts to, or significant changes to, the Pell program. I want to be careful. That proposal, which is a long way from being law, to be clear, and my understanding is the U.S. Senate leadership has a different view and probably some different priorities. But that proposal would do a couple of things to Pell that are quite significant. One of them is that it would establish that a full-time Pell Award is on the basis of the student being enrolled at 15 credits per term. Whereas today, a full-time Pell Award is issued to a student who is enrolled at 12 credits per term, half time 6 credits, 3/4 9. You can sort of do the math. That change would mean that a student who today receives a full Pell for 12 credits under the new law would only receive a partial Pell Grant if they remained enrolled at 12 credits. So that would have the effect of reducing Pell Grants considerably for students who maintain the same credit load. The proposal would also eliminate Pell Grants for students enrolled less than half-time, but it would create a new opportunities for Pell for very short-term credentials, so that wouldn't require being enrolled half-time. So that's a bit confusing or even contradictory. But on the whole, I think this is regarded as a diminishment of Pell access, and I think that's reflected in some expectation of savings for the program in that proposal. But again, that's a long way from, well, it is not yet law. Let me put it that way. Things happen very strangely in Congress, so I just don't want to opine too much about the path from here.
Thank you. Other questions for Ben? Okay, thank you again, Ben. Sarah Foster, are you here for the governor's report?
Madam Chair, we had to slightly reorder the agenda due to the governor's office availability. We
Okay.
should be going into public testimony now.
Okay, thank you. And is that Abby Lee from Oregon
Yes,
Community College Association?
and I've just promoted, so she should be able to join. Abby, are you able to turn on your
I
camera and
am, but my
microphone?
camera, Guthrie, it's not letting me get my camera. Can you hear me?
We can
We
hear you.
can. We've been having a few issues with the camera and mic for folks. I'm working with IT,
Okay.
but maybe we
Well,
should proceed.
if
Yes,
you're
let's
okay,
proceed.
okay. Thank you so much, Chair Rowe, Vice Chair Heyman, Director Cannon, and Commissioners. It is my pleasure to be here with you, and I will just take a few minutes at Vice Chair Heyman's encouragement to give just a couple of updates from community colleges at your meeting. And first, I really want to express appreciation for our partnership with HECC. I will tell you that Director Cannon spends a lot of time answering questions for me and is very available and patient as we are developing this relationship this year. And I am immensely appreciative of that. I want to point out the collaboration that we had with our Ways and Means Committee. With the subcommittee on education, we had a very collaborative approach to your piece of the presentation, and we were able to put in some student stories as well as really highlighting what community colleges do in our presentation. So I think that was extremely successful, as well as the capital construction presentation. I want to highlight that we are really proud of the collegiality that we have with our presidents, that we bring one proposal to HECC, and then HECC has the opportunity to bring that to the governor and to the legislature. And I think that's a unique partnership that is different from some of the other higher education pieces. And then I have a couple of kudos that are not just recognizing individuals, but really updating you on the behind the scenes partnerships that we have with the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, in particular, as I mentioned, Director Cannon's availability, but also Kyle Thomas is working really hard with us with some legislation, was able to add an amendment to a bill that is not only going to look at university reports, but also included community college reports to see if there's any redundancy or outdated reports. And that's going to reduce fatigue and also opportunities to provide the information that you actually need. The financial monitoring report has actually been really a successful iterative process. And so really want to point out that Jim Pinkert has been very receptive to a lot of substantive feedback that we have. And I think that you're going to get a really robust report that we will integrate into our processes at the community colleges. And I think this is going to be a highlight for in the next couple of years. Again, Donna Llewellyn is working with us on the CTE co-requisites. As you heard in your fall meeting, that Amy Cox presented some sobering information about co-requisites and developmental education. And so we're excited about those next steps. And as you think about federal issues, we meet weekly with our presidents and small groups to talk about those implications. Dr. Scari gave you an update last week, but we are specifically to your question, Chair Rowe, we just gathered some information on the potential impact of those Pell changes, and we anticipate over 9,000 students in Oregon would be impacted with a loss of $12 million. And so we have 11 institutions that have given us some information. We're collecting that for the American Association of Community Colleges, which is doing some of that federal advocacy with us. And I will get that report to Director Cannon to let you see what those potential impacts could be. So we are working really hard to make sure that our federal delegation understands what that would mean for our students. We also are embarking on a year-long effort to collaborate and convene conversations on artificial intelligence. And so we will update you on some of those actions at our community colleges. And then finally, thank you so much for your visits to our colleges. I know that Vice Chair Heyman was out at Tillamook on April 23rd. That was the last visit, and I was out at their board meeting last night, and really was a highlight of their board meeting and the collaboration and really the care and concern that you have for the details that are happening at our community colleges. Last, we celebrated 27 outstanding students at the All Oregon Academic Team Luncheon, and that was in April, and it was just exceptional to see really the bravery and and success that's happening on our colleges. Representative Ruiz was the keynote speaker, and he spoke about his background at community colleges and how the TRIO program really impacted his access. And that is another program that really is kind of under scrutiny at the federal level, and we want to make sure that we are advocating for what that means for first generation access. So with that, I am grateful for this opportunity, and again, really for the day-to-day partnership that we have with HECC and for your support of community colleges. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions for Abby Lee? Thank you very much, Abby.
Thank you.
Greg, do we have a time on Sarah? Greg, I'm sorry. Guthrie, do we have a time on Sarah Foster, or should I just keep plowing ahead?
Yes, the agenda has been updated, so we should have the legislative report with Kyle next, followed by community college program approvals, and then Sarah at around 10:05.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm working from an old agenda. So actually we'll go to the consent item and then to Kyle. So the consent item, as you see, are two items from Central Oregon Community College. As you know, if we need any discussion of these, they will need to be pulled out of the consent agenda. If not, then can we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And a second? Second, thank you. All in favor? Raise your hand or say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Kyle Thomas, are you with us? I saw you before. I know you are. There you are.
Hi, good morning, Chair Rowe.
Good morning. Thank you for being with us instead of down the street.
Certainly. Good morning, Chair Rowe, members of the Commission. Kyle Thomas, Director of Legislative and Policy Affairs for HECC. Ben had a lot of news and updates to share with you this morning. I'll take the opposite tact here this morning. I have relatively little in terms of substantive legislative update. Just very quickly, we have concluded our Ways and Means presentation. That was about 1 calendar month of testimony, though, of course, we were not presenting every day to the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Education. We provided over 300 slides of information. We were joined by public university, community college, and workforce board representatives. 7 or 8 public hearings were held. Over 240 pieces of written testimony were submitted, along with the folks who took time out of their day to come down to the Capitol and testify in person or to testify remotely. And so now that having concluded, we're in the waiting period. As I indicated to the Commission last month, we're really sort of have one eye trained towards May 14th, which is the date of the release of the revenue and economic forecast projections that will set the budget levels, that the revenue levels that the state has available to it in order to conclude its legislative session and publish final budgets. They are working on and passing budgets right now, but those are mostly budgets related to the smallest agencies or the smallest boards and commissions that are operating in the state. They really do wait until after the release of the next economic and revenue forecast in order to conclude or really accelerate their budgeting process. I will talk about our HECC-sponsored legislation. For the most part, our bills continue to move forward, save for one. We introduced House Bill 3029 at the start of session. This was really an omnibus workforce, I'll say, fix-it bill. It didn't really fix problems so much as it promoted some greater alignment between Future Ready Oregon programming as well as local workforce board programming. It also made some modifications to language around how the youth workforce programming, the Oregon Youth Employment Program, operates, in particular with some structural changes to its advisory boards as they relate to program, the Oregon Conservation Corps. That bill is no longer moving forward. And the reason that bill is no longer moving forward is related to some concerns that have been the Legislative Counsel's office has identified relative to equity-oriented language in those bills. Not necessarily language that we were seeking to amend, but language that may underpin some of the programming that we offer that was touched by House Bill 3029. So owing to the fact that that concern is enough that consider a must-pass item. Did you lose me for a second?
Yeah, we lost you for a minute. Can you fill in the blanks?
Yeah, I don't know where you lost me. I'm gonna turn my camera off just in case that gives me a little bit more bandwidth. But we have decided not to move forward with one of our bills, House Bill 3029. This is due to a Legislative Council opinion that related to some of the language not only in this bill, but in the underlying workforce statutes related to equity-oriented initiatives that are operated under this body of law. We made the determination to pull the bill back because we didn't want to attempt to resolve the questions that were raised by this LC opinion in a hasty manner. We would prefer to have deeper conversations with partners, with grantees, with other agencies in the state, with our own Department of Justice, in order to determine what a more considered and rational response to the concerns raised by Legislative Council would be, and the time frame we are in the legislative session does not afford us the opportunity to do that. So since House Bill 3029 did not contain really any language that we would consider must-pass language, we've decided to move this issue to the interim to promote a greater level of conversation. The rest of our bills are moving forward as we anticipate they would. Since Abby Lee mentioned it, I will call it out in House Bill 3026, just give you a little bit more information about the provision she mentioned about reporting. There was at the start of session a Representative Paul Evans bill that asked HECC and universities to get together to remove or recommend consolidation and removal of duplicative and unnecessary reporting requirements as they relate to public universities. We seized on that concept and expanded it, not only to include community colleges in that examination, but also to pull a group together to recommend the modification of or addition of other reporting that would provide policymakers with the quality data and information that they need to make good higher education policy. And the recommendations for any new or altered reporting would substantially rely on existing staffing or technology. So we hope to, prior to the next long session in 2027, deliver a report that really sort of not only streamlines, but significantly improves the type of information that we provide and the institutions provide to the legislature on a regular basis. That's contained in House Bill 3026, along with several other items. In terms of other legislation that we are looking at, if you sort of glance through my legislative report, you'll see almost all of them have the tagline that says, in the Joint Committee on Ways and Means. And so I am unable to really today to provide a lot of political handicapping on whether any of those will move forward. But I did want to highlight just a few of them because I think we are not official supporters of any of them in the sense that we are not lobbying on behalf of any of these pieces of legislation, but a few of them do present, I think, ideas that we find interesting, worthwhile, valuable, and are likely to be ideas that we will continue to look at in the future in the event that they are not funded today. One of these is House Bill 2686. This is a bill that provides funding to HECC to establish an adult reconnect program to bring adults back with some college credit but no degree, and bring them back into any public institution of higher education to complete a degree or certificate program, not just the institution from which they initially acquired some credits. Um, in terms of our adult attainment goals, in terms of economic development, we believe there's an opportunity and certainly the capacity within the state's current higher education system to bring these adults back. And we ourselves have preferenced a statewide coordinated strategy in this area versus the funding of individual institutional efforts to bring their own students back to their own institutions. There are many reasons students discontinue. One of the reasons students discontinue is dissatisfaction with the experience that they've had. And even disregarding that, their current goals, current needs for upskilling, retraining, or certificate or degree attainment may be different than the goals that sought them to attend an institution of higher education in the first place. So we're certainly interested in such a statewide coordinated effort, even if it does not manage to achieve funding in this particular legislative session. Other items that we're interested in, there is a group of advocates working on student basic needs issues. Those are represented in House Bill 3182 and its partner House Bill 3183. And altogether, these bills do a few things. The first thing that House Bill 3182 does is establish $10 million in basic needs programming that HECC would award to institutions by grant formula. That would support not just the building of capacity, but also direct assistance to students with basic needs issues. That bill also proposes $6.5 million in affordable housing supports to nonprofit organizations that are doing work to connect students with affordable housing. And also $2 million for an expansion of the Open Educational Resources program that we currently operate with a grant to Lynn Benton Community College. The bill also establishes a task force to examine student housing issues. This was a recommendation that came out of the Joint Task Force for Underrepresented Student Success. And basically, the task force determined, yes, we agree there is an issue related to student housing, but we do not have the capacity, expertise in order to design a solution today. So it recognized the issue and punted consideration to a more robust group. This bill seeks to establish that group in law. Other legislation we're looking at is again, a bill that's related to the recommendations from that task force. And this is Senate Bill 979, which establishes a task force for students with disabilities, for HECC to pull together institutions, students, other partners in order to come up with a comprehensive series of recommendations in order to improve the outcomes of students with disabilities of all types. I think commissioners may be aware generally, while there's a sort of a robust series of laws, both state and federal, that govern how students with disabilities are required to be served in the K-12 system, there is not that same robust series of state and federal law relative to how students are served at institutions of higher education. So this would be the first step towards examining what needs to change from a legal and policy standpoint. And then the last item I'll mention is Senate Bill 83. This is a very high-profile piece of legislation that is most known for repealing the state's wildfire maps that were adopted a couple of years ago. I mention this because we are involved in wildfire conversations in so much that our own Oregon Conservation Corps provides opportunities to young adults to gain experience and training in mitigation activity, fuels reduction and that type of activity. And we currently believe that we're sitting sort of on the inside pathway for potential funding for the continuation of that program. That's related to Senate Bill 83, of course. It's also related to a wildfire working group that has been working for several months at this point in order to come up with a sustainable investment of approximately $140 million for ongoing wildfire prevention and response activity in the state. So we're hopeful that that investment will come through by the end of the legislative session. That's my remarks. Happy to answer any questions.
For not having much of a report, that was quite a report, Cal. It's a very good update as always. Questions for Cal? Thank you, sir. Okay, Guthrie and Ben, help me manage the time. Greg and I could go ahead with our report on our visits, but that may be 30 minutes. Does that mess up Sarah's schedule?
Madam Chair, I would propose going to Jim Pinkard with item 9.1. That should slot in nicely for 20 minutes.
Okay, folks, we are playing 52 pickup and shuffling this agenda. That's fine. Thank you. Glad to see you, Mr. Pinkard. Thank you. Always
yes, good
ready.
morning. Thank you, Madam Chair, members. It's a pleasure to be here on a beautiful Oregon day with all of you. For the record, my name is Jim Pinkard with the Office of Post-Secondary Finance and Capital here at the HECC. And this is docket item 9.1, which we do have a short docket item posted on the within the meeting materials for your preference. This is not an action item for you, but because the HECC plays a limited role in the public university tuition setting process, whereby the HECC is tasked to review proposed annual tuition and fee increases that exceed 5% for resident undergraduate students. Because of that, I feel somewhat obligated every spring to give you an update on kind of where the tuition setting process stands for all 7 of the public universities, and that's what this docket item does. To be clear, none of them are expected to seek the Commission's approval for an increase greater than 5%. I will say that the impact on student affordability is a little unclear at this point. I'll get into that in just a few minutes. But within the docket item, we do note that 6 of the 7 universities have taken their increase request to their board. Their board has adopted. Most of them are in the range of 3-4%. Some are close to that 5% range. Just for historical reference, the last time we had any of the public universities make a request that exceeded 5% was in 2019. So it's been a good 5-6 years since that has occurred. In the docket item, in the table on page 1, we do note the annual tuition and fee increase amounts for entering full-time freshmen. And we do note the weighted average calculation for those with multiple campuses or multiple student cohorts, just for your reference. In terms of process, the institutions are tasked with conducting a very inclusive and a very transparent tuition setting process, as we note on page 2. And so students are invited into the conversation and are required to sit on the tuition advisory body or tuition setting body at each of the campuses. Faculty and staff members are also included as well. We note the total number of meetings, and we also note the total number of student forums that were held. Many of the institutions are trying different tactics as to how to engage more with their students from the campus community in these conversations. They're having town hall style presentations and meetings, some in person, some online. They're sending out surveys. The student participation in the process was considerably higher this year, at least based on what we observed, than it has been in the past. I think in the last few years, of course, because of the pandemic, I think that had an effect. So overall, we've seen that fees are remaining relatively stable. Some of the fees are increasing for the health fees to maintain and sometimes expand health services. In a few instances, there were increases to fees that had experienced little or no increase in 3, 4, 5 years. We saw some of that as well. So we offer within the docket item limited observations around kind of what we noticed for the process. I will conclude by saying that back in February, we did have a much more detailed conversation about this with the Funding and Achievement Subcommittee Commissioners, chaired by Vice Chair Heyman. And we focused some of that conversation around the connection to student affordability. And I want to spend just a few minutes talking about that. So I can't describe right now how these increases will actually affect affordability this coming fall, just because of the uncertainty at the federal level around Pell funding and with OOG and Promise funding. You heard Ben just briefly, shortly and during his update, talk a little bit about that. So we can't offer any definitive explanation as to how these 4 to 5% increases in tuition and fees for next academic year in the fall will impact student affordability. What I can say is that these 4 to 5% increases relate to the sticker price for tuition and fees for undergraduate non-resident students only. And we have seen in the last decade an annual increase of about 4.2% for, again, the sticker price for tuition and fees. But that's not actually what students pay. And so when we look at the full cost of attendance, when we add in tuition and fees, housing, room and board, transportation costs, in the last decade, the annual increase for the full cost of attendance on average across our public universities has been about 2.8 to 3% per year. The average net price, what students actually pay, has increased around 2.2, 2.3% per year over the last decade. So we've made great progress in the past due to the growth in the state's contribution to state funding for financial aid, OOG, Oregon Promise, predominantly. And we've also seen growth in the funding that the universities have set aside for remissions as well. In fact, just in the last 5 years or so, the public universities in the aggregate have almost doubled the number of dollars that they've set aside for student remissions, both of which have helped kind of keep the net price contained in the 2 to 2.5% per year range. So I'll offer that historical perspective, hoping that trend continues over the next year into the next academic year, but it's too early to tell for sure exactly what that will look like for the average net price for student affordability for next year. I can say, based on the great data that Dr. Amy Cox and her team put together in Research and Data, which is also available through the Public University Data dashboard on our website, with disaggregated information by demographic. Over the last decade, in the aggregate across the universities, the affordability rate has declined from 64% to 50%, which is an improvement. So what that essentially means is that 10 years ago, 2/3 of our public university students could not afford the cost of attending a university, even after applying financial aid and an estimate of their own student earnings. In the 2022-23 academic year, which is the most recent year for the data that I have, it's half, so it's 50%. So that's an improvement. However, I'll underscore the simple fact that it's 50%. So that means 1 out of every 2 students at our public universities are still facing a level of unaffordability. So we'll keep monitoring the affordability connection between tuition and fees and affordability, and likely seek to bring back to you greater information into the future once we have more clarity. So that's the update I have for you this morning on the tuition and fee setting process at our public universities, and I'll pause there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr.
Chair.
Yamasaki.
Oh,
Mr. Yamasaki?
thank you. Thanks, Jim. I have a quick question. Out of the tuition and fees, what percentage is the fee and what percentage is the tuition, Jim? I know that my understanding, I thought, was that certain majors, the fees were different. So I just wondered what the percentage split was between tuition and fees.
I appreciate the question. I don't have a specific answer for you. I'm going to and I hazard to make a guess. We have that information in detail, and we can share that information with you. But I don't have it off the top of my head. You're bringing up a great point though about tuition and fees in general. What you're looking at on page 1 of our docket item is tuition and fees added together, and these are mandatory fees. So this does not include certain fees that the students themselves set, which are also mandatory. It does not include differential tuition, nor does it include certain course-based fees that students pay only if they choose to enroll in certain courses or on campus. And so I may guess it's probably 60-40 in terms of, tuition fee, but I would have to verify that, so.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Devlin.
Madam Chair, I just had a couple of questions. One, I obviously see, that Eastern Oregon is at 3.6 approximately, and OIT is at a consolidated 409, and U of O is applying their increase only to their incoming freshmen. But I do see that, OSU, both Corvallis and Cascades is at 4.8. PSU is at 4.98. SOU is at 4.99. And Western Oregon is at 5. When the institutions are proposing these, do we have access to what they hope to generate with these increases? What they believe the amount of revenue that will be generated?
I think, Commissioner, the short answer is yes, simply because this tuition and fee setting conversation is part of every year the larger budget setting conversation for the university. So the university will seek to establish its budget by the end of June for the next budget year starting July 1st. And as part of, understanding all the revenues that are coming in and all the spending that has to occur, tuition and fee revenue is, of course, a main driver of all their revenues. So many of the universities do, as part of their conversations and interactions with their own governing boards that we observe, they do publicly post information related to what you're asking about, which is in terms of if we have this proposed increase will lead to this increase in revenue, which will lead to a larger, set of revenues, and then the spending for the whole budget. So,
Follow up. The commission has very clearly stated its concern about how the current service level is set. But the way to meet whatever needs people are determining as current service level is between the state support, tuition, and then other funds. Do we see any substantial increase in the other funds category for institutions? I mean, is there anything out there that's going to substantially increase that number? Or is it solely going to be between the amount of state aid and the amount of tuition and fees?
I think the short answer is yes, it'll predominantly be through the interaction between state and student revenue. The other revenue is largely based on, especially when we look at the general fund or education and general funds of the institutions, largely based on, other types of revenues coming in when they lease out space, for example, on campus to a private group that may use an academic-based facility. So we've seen over time that other revenue has been relatively stable. There's not a lot of volatility up or down in it. Granted, we did see during the pandemic that revenue dropped like other revenues did, and it's recovered in many cases to its pre-pandemic level. But I don't foresee that being a source of revenue to reduce the reliance on both state and student revenues.
Has there been follow-up, Madam Chair?
Go ahead.
Has there been any indication by some of the institutions with major research components that they're going to have to now, under new federal guidelines in effect, have to pass some of their overhead costs on to other areas within the institution.
I apologize. I didn't actually hear that question.
Oh, okay. I was indicating, has there been any indication by particularly the institutions that have large research components that because of some of the changes at the federal level, they may have to pass on some of their overhead costs onto different areas within the institution?
I don't have any information on that for you. I haven't asked that question of them. I think there's so much uncertainty that it's difficult to answer that question. I honestly don't know. I don't know how to answer that question just because of the uncertainty at the federal level. So I don't want to even hazard a guess.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe we'll get some certainty at the federal level in about 4 years.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hayman.
Thank you. Jim, just a quick question. Do you have any sense if and to what extent institutions might choose to review and revisit their tuition decisions based on what the legislature chooses to do with regards to funding?
I do. Thanks for the question. Many of the universities will, in essence, pass a preliminary budget in, May or June, and in the fall, they'll revisit that budget once they know with more certainty what the enrollment for the fall will be, once they know what federal revenues will be, once they know what federal financial aid revenues will be, and once they also know what state funding will be. So many of them will, in some cases, as part of the board resolution, they'll pass essentially a mechanism within that resolution that allows the administration of the institution to revisit and sometimes change the tuition rate based on, hey, if we get more state funding, we'll lower the rate because of the direct connection between the two. Some of the universities will pass essentially what is a spending authority limit in June or May or June timeframe, and then in the fall they'll pass an actual budget once they know with more certainty. So many of the universities, excuse me, do kind of have a process in place to where they can consider that.
Thank you, Jim. Commissioner Edwards.
Hi, thanks, Jim. Question is around uncertainty, which thank you for raising. It all feels so business as usual when you look at the paperwork, but it's not business as usual. How should we think about these uncertainties starting to become more certain? And it's only going to kind of go in one direction, which is more and more pressure on those on tuition going up. And how do we, what's the preparation for that? Are we preparing for that uncertainty? How are you thinking about modeling it? What are the kind of conversations that are going on about the tsunami that's potentially coming after this earthquake that just happened? And because I don't want to be kind of caught flat-footed on this or look like I'm trying to sort of deny how significant the disruption is to higher ed. But I got nothing to say right now if someone asks me a question.
And I don't either, to be honest with you. I can point to work being done here within the HECC and at the campus level to try to work on gaining a better understanding of what that looks like going forward. So translating that uncertainty to a better understanding of what does that mean today in the short term? What does it mean in the long term for the financial sustainability of the universities and the community colleges in the state. And so I'll defer to Ben in just a second here if I can. And I do want to correct, Madam Chair, something I said just a few minutes ago before I go any further, but I'll respond to Commissioner Edwards by saying that we do have work ongoing right now in two directions. One, with the technical regional universities, specifically around financial sustainability, and in fact, a little bit later on your agenda, docket item 9.2, I'll provide you with an update on that work, because I think part of that work will involve kind of seeking answers to the questions that you're asking. Separate from that, we have ongoing work around an annual financial sustainability report that we're working on for both the public universities and the community colleges. Dr. Abby Lee this morning in her commentary for the community colleges referenced that report. And I think that work in and of itself will seek to start attempting to answer some of those questions about how does this all come together to influence and impact our institutions and their financial sustainability going forward. As a commission, my hope is to prepare all of you for some of that system-wide. What does that mean, not just for individual institutions, but system-wide for the state of higher education in Oregon? And what do we need to be thinking about as that progresses? So I can't offer answers this morning. I can offer that we're working on it, and we're hoping that in June for the Funding and Achievement Subcommittee meeting, for those commissioners who participate in that, we're going to release the Public University Financial Sustainability Report. And during that conversation, we'll invite a panel of the universities and their representation to engage with all of you in a conversation around some of those questions. In August at the Funding and Achievement Subcommittee meeting, we will do the same with the community colleges. We'll release the Financial Sustainability Report, which will include kind of some of that information about what does the future look like. We'll also have a panel conversation where we will invite some of the community college presidents and business officers to engage in some of those questions. I wanted
Jim,
to correct
go ahead.
before I went any.
Go ahead and make your correction, and then I want to jump in, please, and then we're going to wrap this up in a minute.
Yeah, I do very briefly want to correct. Earlier, I said when Commissioner Yamasaki asked about the split between tuition and fees, and I suggested it was probably around 60-40. I was wrong, and I was off. It's closer to 84% tuition and fees, 16%, 84% for tuition and 16% for fees as we look at the aggregate across all seven. So I just wanted to correct the record. Thanks.
Commissioner Edwards, if I can jump in before we go to Sarah Foster. You have asked the most important question, and it has to be the work of this commission. The uncertainty and how we face it and what we do has to be the work of this commission, certainly for the next year or two. In the report that Greg and I are going to give after Sarah Foster and after the break, you will hear directionally some things that we think need to happen. And then I think it's going to be up to the commission to decide how to go about that work, how to initiate it with our partners at the universities and the colleges. But you are right. We cannot sit here and wait for the tsunami. We have to be looking at the conditions we have now, which are not good in many cases, and start to push forward on what we need to do about it as a commission and as a state. And we will certainly need the governor's help and support in that. But we're going to start sketching out a little bit of that picture in a little while.
Thanks. I guess I just wanted to raise, I appreciate Ben's comments at the last meeting about, there's no point being panicked and running around like crazy, but we do have to be, we have to calibrate the way that we think about incrementalism versus significant change. And I just don't see a world where incrementalism is going to work very well in the next couple of years. And how we manage that with all of these other kind of red flag indicators that we're going to talk about a little bit later on even, is I think of deep importance. How we communicate the vibe of the commission, you know.
I couldn't agree more, and please raise that point at every meeting if I don't. So thank you. Okay, Jim, you're going to be back on later with the regionals, and I think now, if I'm okay, Guthrie, can we move to Sarah Foster?
We can indeed.
Okay, I see you there. Thank you, Sarah, for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you. It looks like I missed a robust discussion, so my apologies.
More to come.
But I, as I was reflecting, I have on the top of my notepad every morning is doing a lot of work living within the questions, because I think we have a lot of questions right now. And we're living in a lot of uncertainty. So just appreciate all of your leadership during these challenging times, in particular in the higher ed space. So just want to thank you.
We've lost your
synthesize some of what you've been discussing and thinking about how we might, together move some ideas forward. So just appreciate that. I don't know if I have much to offer here in terms of additional updates from the last time I was in front of you, but just might reiterate some of the position the governor's office is taking, in particular around the federal impacts. I think it's important. Maybe sometimes you hear things 3 times and it sinks in that, we're really responding and have stood up a rapid response infrastructure. And as things come in, I just want to thank Ben and his team at the HECC to be very responsive and quickly respond and elevate, whether it's a funding freeze, a termination notice, another executive order, so that we can work with agency leadership to determine how we respond and what we surface. And we do surface this to both the governor's office, general counsel, and working closely with the AG's office. So just wanted to share again and reiterate that process is in place, and appreciate and thank Ben's team for engaging with us in as much problem solving as we can do in these uncertain times. Also been, continuing to keep in touch with the universities who are convening to elevate kind of impacts across the system, so that the governor is apprised of all the ways in which universities are experiencing funding cuts, freezes, et cetera, that don't necessarily directly impact the HECC as an organization, but the higher ed ecosystem writ large. We reiterate again that we cannot backfill with state funding across the issues that are impacted. And so we are, of course, at the governor's office having intentional conversations around all of the potential impacts and planning. But we don't know what we don't know. So also appreciated Ben's comments at the last meeting around, staying the course on our work, doubling down on equity, and continuing to engage and appreciate HECC's leadership in that space. As you know, we're don't have what you think we're all waiting for the May revenue forecast to come out, and that is not out yet. So I think we're still in a holding pattern before we are starting to get really in the weeds on making budget as the legislature makes their budget decisions. But I think after that revenue forecast comes out, that will help guide our engagement with the legislature as we, continue to advocate for the governor's recommended budget. So appreciate, all the work that your team did, Ben and the HECC, to put together the presentations for ways and means. And I think higher ed funding is complex. So just appreciate Jim and his team to continue to demystify it for the legislature as they make their funding decisions. So that's my update. I do want to also just answer some questions if there is any, but the governor also made an announcement last week, and just appreciate the HECC's partnership in signing a MOU with NVIDIA around AI and semiconductor workforce and talent development. We're really excited about that opportunity. alongside a 10 million investment in the Semiconductor Talent Sustaining Fund at the HECC. So are eager to roll up our sleeves and start to get into that implementation, as it will stand up and the money will help stand up ambassadors at our community colleges and universities. That's really the first task of the MOU. So just appreciate Ben's leadership and kind of getting that across the finish line, and appreciate your leadership generally during these uncertain times. So here to answer any questions. Brief update. Nothing earth-shattering, I don't think, from our last meeting, but was just appreciative of having the space again to be in front of y'all.
Thank you, Sarah. Questions for Sarah? Okay, looks not. Sarah, if you are not able to stay on after our break, then we will give you an update of, we don't have anything in writing, but an update of the report that Greg and I are making, and sort of directionally what we think the HECC needs to be considering and leading in right now.
It's at, the break is now, and then you're coming back on at 10:30.
That's correct.
Yeah, I can be here.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, commissioners, we're on break and we are coming back at 10:30.
Guthrie,
Yes, Commissioner.
I still have no audio.
You can't hear us?
No.
Well, did you hear Guthrie say, can you hear us?
Now I can hear you.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Guthrie, I'm waiting for a go from you. Are we ready?
We should be ready. It looks like a few commissioners are filtering back in, but we have Dr. Edwards and Nick Keogh on the line with us for our invited guest testimony.
Oh, okay. Rearranged incorrectly then, correct? Correct me.
Yes, we should
I
be
get-
back on the agenda as originally noted.
Okay, I apologize. And would you make sure to get a note to Sarah Guthrie, to Sarah, please, Guthrie, and tell her when we are
Yes.
going to come back on the report?
Yes,
Thank you.
I've
Okay. In that case, we will go ahead and start with Nick and Mark. Thank you for being here. If you'll introduce yourselves.
Hi there, I'm Mark Edwards. I'm a sociology professor at Oregon State University, and I direct the OSU Policy Analysis Lab. Nick, I'll let you go ahead, and then I'll proceed.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, commissioners. Thanks for having us today. My name is Nick Keogh, and I'm currently the legislative and political strategist at the American Federation of Teachers, Oregon. But many of you know me during my previous time at the Oregon Student Association. So here, wearing a new hat, and I'm actually coming to you live from Salem, Western Oregon University in downtown Salem, where we are having a huge student basic needs advocacy day, and there are students, benefits navigators, advocates, librarians from across the state here at the Capitol today advocating for the Student Basic Needs and Workforce Stabilization Act. So happy to be here, stepping away from that real quick. And yeah, I'll let Mark kick us off.
Thank you, Nick. It's very good to see you and your new hat.
Good to see you as well.
Well, thanks for the chance to tell you a little bit today, both about the OSU Policy Analysis Lab. We refer to ourselves as OPAL, and also to fill you in on some of the findings in the Oregon Disabled Student Experience Survey from 2024. OPAL is located in the School of Public Policy in the College of Liberal Arts at Oregon State University. And for about 15 years, we have provided assistance to clients on and off campus, completing policy relevant social science research. The lab currently consists of 7 funded master's degree students, as well as a part-time director, that's me, and then the volunteer work of about half a dozen faculty in the School of Public Policy that advise us on various projects. Over the years, we've worked for federal and state, county, city governments, as well as a state agency, all kinds of state agencies, and for a wide variety of nonprofit organizations, mostly in Oregon. And we tackle policy questions from a wide variety of sectors. So we'll address policies related to education, to clean energy, social services, transportation, public health. In all of these projects, though, our goal is to give our grad students necessary training to prepare them for their future careers, and while at the same time producing trustworthy and high quality research for our clients. And I should add that we're expanding our work now to more and more include undergraduates in these training opportunities. We have a team right now working in Benton County to develop a kind of not just a physical map, but a sort of organizational and network map of how all of the social safety net programs, organizations, all of those things link together for our county, with a long-term goal perhaps of creating a tool that would, like an app or something, that will be valuable for service providers as well as for potential clients. In our current main portfolio of projects, Right now, we're completing a survey of Oregon college students to ask about basic needs like food insecurity and housing insecurity, and particularly about student awareness of benefits navigators on their campuses. So that's being funded by Basic Needs Oregon, the College Benefits Navigator Consortium. We're also completing a service assessment for the Oregon Food Bank to help them identify gaps in their services. We're working for the Oregon Health Authority on a variety of projects, needs assessment for low-income housing around the state for people with substance use disorder. We're helping them to improve their process for writing contracts between OHA and community-based organizations, as well as providing technical assistance on helping them to link together disparate data sets that don't communicate with each other very well. Funding for all these students comes from a variety of sources. It's a mixture of fee-based projects, grants, and departmental funds. What I want to do is highlight first just one of my students who was really the lead author in this report that Nick and I are going to comment on today. So Atifa Najam, a year and a half ago, was leaving Afghanistan to go into Pakistan and pick up her visa and come to America for the first time. And we'd recruited her to come here to be in the Master of Public Policy program. We assembled funds through the Laurel Scholarship and through departmental funds. And when we got her here, right away put her to work learning, developing skills. And over the course of those months, developed enough skills to where then we were able to put her onto projects that were funded by a variety of different clients, and that helped to basically pay for the services she was providing and pay for her education. And so she produced reports while a master's degree student here for our Office of Institutional Diversity, for the Division of Student Affairs, for OSU's Counseling and Psychological Services unit. And she couldn't join us here today, but she's preparing to graduate in June. And she provided the analysis initially for this report that I'll now quickly tell you about. In 2024, we were asked by the Oregon Student Association to assist in analyzing data that had been collected from 318 college students in Oregon from 17 different colleges and universities around the state, all of whom identified themselves as having a disability. And Atiba completed the initial analysis, and then she and I together wrote up the final brief report. The sample of students included many who were first-generation college students, many who were low-income students, many who were LGBTQ students. About half of the sample indicated that they had a physical disability. About 80% indicated that they had a mental or emotional disability. Now, we can't claim that this is a random sample of all students in Oregon that have disabilities, but it was quite diverse. So we have certainly some kind of a cross-section here that captures what these students have to say. So I'll just highlight a few of the main findings that were derived from this fairly small sample. One of those is simply that the respondents were divided with regard to their assessment of their campus facilities and the inclusive climate of their campus. For example, about a third described their campus culture as slightly or not at all inclusive, but 2/3 said it was at least moderately inclusive. So it wasn't all negative by any means. About 20% said that physical accessibility of campus was poor or very poor, so about 1 in 5. But about 43% said it was good or even very good. The students were able to also to offer longer open-ended answers to some of the questions. So this was not merely yes, no, and kind of pick from a variety of options. From that qualitative data, we noted that while some complained of non-accommodating faculty or of microaggressions from fellow students or faculty. Others highlighted things like they'd say, well, the teachers and fellow students, they've been actually wonderfully understanding. Students near the end of the survey were kind of given an opportunity to give the last word, to just say anything else they wanted to that didn't seem to be captured by the survey. And while many expressed hope for more progress and even gratitude for accommodations that they'd received already, they also did advocate for more faculty and staff education and training, and for additional improvements to physical accessibility and navigable space. So I'm going to let Nick now comment on kind of the context of this and some of the implications of what he sees also in the report, and then we'll be available for some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, for laying out how the survey worked and highlighting some of those findings. And yeah, the findings of the survey, while insightful, were not completely surprising. I think the reason that the Oregon Student Association undertook the survey in partnership with Disability Rights Oregon was because we were hearing regularly from students with disabilities in Oregon that they did not have the support that they needed to be successful as students. And so we've heard many stories of students not getting proper accommodations, about getting accommodations, but then those accommodations not being respected or honored. And of course, we've heard stories of ableism and challenges navigating the built environment of campus. And as Mark highlighted, it's a bit of a mixed bag. There are some people that do a lot of students that feel satisfied with the current way that we approach disability services at our institutions. But there are also a lot of folks that have faced really significant challenges and see a lot of areas where there are room for an improvement. And I'll also say that this is something that came up really consistently when the Joint Task Force on Student Success for Underrepresented Students in Higher Education, oh, it's a mouthful, Jay Tushy, if you'll recall, when they did their statewide listening sessions where the legislature went around, this was something that consistently came up on campuses from underrepresented students, that we need to do more to support students with disabilities in Oregon and their needs. And yeah, the reality is that today in Oregon and nationwide, students with disabilities experience lower graduation rates and higher dropout rates than their peers due to insufficient support and resources. And this is, not something we can accept, because I think we all agree that equal access to education is not just a matter of fairness, but a fundamental civil right, and it's the law under the American with Disabilities Act. Every student, regardless of ability, deserves the opportunity to pursue higher education without facing unnecessary barriers. So we know that we must do more. And I really hope that this survey can just be the start. You know, beyond using the survey to learn more about the experience of students with disabilities, it was also our hope then in administering the survey that the results would encourage the Higher Education Coordinating Commission and the state legislature to put more attention into this work. Following the conclusion of the survey, actually, OSA, Disability Rights Oregon, and OCTPAT, the Oregon Community Table on Post-Secondary Education and Training, it's a newer higher ed advocacy group, in partnership with Senator Gelser Bluin, introduced a bill, Senate Bill 979, during the 2025 session that's happening right now, that would require the HECC to convene a Students with Disabilities Success Work Group that would be tasked with assessing whether changes to existing laws, institutional policies, or financial investments could enhance the academic experience and outcomes of students with disabilities. And yeah, this was also one of the recommendations that came out of Jay Tushy. So it was really exciting for us to get this bill introduced this session, and it was going really well and had a really clear path to passage. And unfortunately, in the end, the HEC had to assess a fiscal cost on the bill because it was determined that there wouldn't, there HEC would not need additional resources to convene and administer the group. But part of the bill included, collecting research and data on how things are currently. And so in the end, the HEC had to attach a fiscal to this bill. And, in the budget climate that we are in the state legislature right now, that's going to be tough. And it definitely has, put this bill at risk, a bill we thought was going to be pretty easy to pass at risk of passing. And so, that's unfortunate that could be the thing that prevents this bill from passing. But I think the thing I really want to highlight here is that I think, we should all be concerned that the Higher Education Coordinating Commission doesn't have currently much data on how disability services are administered throughout the state, how each campus does it differently, or even a lot of data on what the outcomes of students with disabilities are in Oregon. So, I'm not trying to shame the agency in any way. And I'm definitely not trying to discredit the really incredible work that is happening in our disability services and with staff and students across the state. Many students with disabilities are benefiting from the services offered today, despite, a lot still falling through the cracks. And when we reached out about this survey, we heard back from numerous disability support staff and centers who were thrilled to partner on this work and to promote this survey. And we heard from students as well who took the survey that we asked questions that they've never been asked in their entire higher education journey. And they were really grateful that someone, wanted to know that what their experience has been as a student with disabilities, and what, helping us understand what we can do better as a state to meet their needs. So, there is a lot of eagerness to, continue this work. And I really hope that this survey can be the start. We really did this first survey with very little resources at OSA and just kind of promoted it word of mouth and reaching out to the disability centers. But, I think there could be a lot, more work done in this area to, understand all the things that our students with disabilities face in Oregon and how we can better support them. And yeah, it's the right thing to do for our students. It makes our higher education system stronger. So yeah, thank you, Mark, for helping us out on analyzing these results. I hope everyone will check out the report. And, so many of the stories that the students shared are just so moving and impactful, and it really matters. So thank you all for the time. And yeah, like Mark said, I think we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Guthrie, do you have a question?
Not a question, Madam Chair. I'll just note that while the report came in a bit late to be included in your materials, I can add it as an exhibit to this meeting and share it with the commission.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We will read it. Any questions? Commissioner Simnett.
I'm just, first of all, thank you for presenting on the report and for doing the work. I think it's really exciting to hear that this work is being done and that it is supported by students at the policy center, and that there's that collaboration. It seems like a very exciting example of community university partnership on an issue that really affects students. So just wanted to say that. I'll look forward to looking at the report in more detail, but I was curious about you talking about how students felt some campuses were inclusive and some weren't. I was wondering if you had either a definition of what inclusive means, or if there was some data or evidence or some analysis that can just sort of flesh out what inclusivity means in respect to this particular group of students.
I will say that from the the closed-ended ones, we didn't tell people here's what we mean by inclusivity, and therefore how you might answer it. So we were leaving it to their own definition on many of the questions. I think probably if we dig a little further into the qualitative work, we might at least be able to find some clues there as they talk about what they mean and what they point to. So I think that the qualitative comments provide some of that, and there's probably more that can be done to dig more deeply into that as kind of a question of what do they mean by inclusivity. But I think it also suggests, as Nick has pointed out, space for other projects throughout the state to listen more often, in more rich detail to hear what people have to say about their experience. I don't know, Nick, anything you want to comment on that?
I think you covered it. That was great.
Thank you for that response. I just wanted to say I would be very interested to hear more about how students are defining inclusivity. We use this word a lot, and I'm not certain that that there's a shared understanding about what students are meaning when they say that, and what those others are using. So thank you so much for that work.
Thank you for that question, Commissioner Simnett. Mark and Nick, thank you very much for the presentation. Look forward to reading it.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, Guthrie is always right. We are back on schedule. He knew it would happen. So thank you, Guthrie, for trying to keep me straight. We're going to go now to the report that Greg and I have from our visits, the last year and 3 months of visits. This is just, we're going to give you first sort of, we'll give you a broad overview. Then Greg will go into some of the specific things we heard over and over from the presidents, both at the college level and at the university level. And then since we've done these 23, 24, who's counting, visits, since then we've had some kind of collective reflections of what that means in terms of what we're seeing in the aggregate. So we're going to wrap up with that and what we think the implications of what we've learned and observed at these schools in the set of current conditions we have. So to start, first of all, every one of these schools, really, I think we told you this in a snippet update several meetings ago, but they were all so incredibly welcoming. And it really took a lot of planning on their part to decide. We were there 3 to 4 hours, usually at most, some a little bit more. But they had to coordinate all the different people they wanted us to see, and the buildings and the tours. And so in that time, and say the 4 hours, we met a range of people on every single campus. We always met with students, which was important to us, and that was very helpful. We, of course, met with senior administrators. On most campuses, we met with the top financial officer. I think on most campuses, we met with special program leadership, especially in the area of student support services or affinity groups. We had a lot of meetings, though, around student support services or other student-centered programs. As I said, we had tours of the campus, which often included, not surprisingly, what the school leadership thought was their greatest capital need. They would want to show that to us. And it was helpful to see. Their needs are very real. So that was it was all very helpful. The overall observations, I would say, is that not surprisingly, hearing firsthand and being there, and hearing firsthand the biggest challenges on these campuses really made a difference. It's like meeting an individual. You can't really begin to get a full picture without seeing where they live and talking to people who depend on them. And of course, at these schools, it's way beyond the education they provide. I mean, these schools live within a community. And so, in many places, if not most, they're one of the largest employers. In addition to that, they, of course, have loads of community action partners that are separate from the school. The schools themselves are gathering places and sources of real pride for the community. And almost the more rural they are and the smaller they are, sometimes the more struggling they are, the more that is true, that you can see their essentiality in the community. In seeing the campuses, we could see very clearly the different generations of buildings. My least favorite is brutalist architecture, and a lot of our community colleges were built during that wonderful brutalist period. But anyway, then you see a new building, but you can really see both condition and in style the different generations of buildings. Everywhere you can see the deep commitment to students. Everywhere you can see the deep commitment to diversity. Everywhere you can see both the benefits and the pressures of online, which almost didn't exist or didn't substantially exist before the pandemic. There are many underutilized buildings because of that. There are many fewer people on campuses. Some of the campuses felt fairly quiet. And I would say, and Greg can disagree with me if I'm wrong, no, he will, that's most apparent at the community colleges, the switch to online. And students, even if they're enrolled in person full-time, how many classes are online now? Either it's their option or they're all available online. So you have a lot. It's harder to build community and to sustain it, I would say. And Greg, if you want to jump in now and maybe add anything to that, and then maybe talk about what we heard consistently from the presidents.
Yes, Sandy, thank you so much for that. Hopefully you can hear me. I just want to reiterate some of the things you said first. I think one of the reasons we chose to do these visits was so the recognition that perhaps as part of the pandemic, but also our focus is on sort of higher education in aggregate, and feeling that it was these visits would help us better understand the individual needs, but also uniqueness of each one of those institutions. And I would say that one of the things we heard over and over again was the desire for our schools for us to better understand their uniqueness in terms of mission, in terms of character, in terms of the population they serve. And I would just say, while I'm sure there's more to learn there, I think the visits really did help us to get a clearer sense and appreciation for those differences. And consistently, we heard that from universities and community colleges, wanting us to understand that we're not all the same, we're not all serving the same people, we have different needs, we have different aspirations, and I think that these visits and our subsequent understanding, I think, will help us to better serve those unique characteristics. The other second thing we heard consistently, which is I'm sure no surprise, is there's a need, universal expressed need for more resources. And I think one of the things the visits did for us is to help us to connect that need to sort of real issues and real opportunities on those campuses. So it's not just like, oh, we have needs. It was like, this is a place in which we have challenges, or this is a place where we have a great opportunity to expand what we are able to do in our community and to better serve, and the resources necessary to do that were a focus of, I think, the conversation in every one of certainly the institutions I visited, community college and university alike. They express those needs differently, but there's no lack of expression of that need. And I would say that if I focus on the universities for a second, while there were many other things that were differentiating in terms of their expressions and shared sense to us, the sense in which they were unified was really on these two issues. We want to be recognized that we're in our unique missions, that land grant institution is different than a liberal arts institution, those different things like that, and that need for resources. But beyond that, the community colleges expressed, I think, a deep interest that we as the commission should be impacting our thinking going forward. And what we really heard is they have a desire for greater work with us. They want us to do more, and in some specific ways. We sort of summarize this in terms of communication, collaboration, and wanted to talk a little bit about what that looks like. I think, for instance, Abby Lee's speaking with us today is, I think, a representation of a renewed interest in how do we continue a dialogue in a way that we actually are continuously cognizant of those needs and those aspirations that our schools and our students have. They're very interested in that, and they're very interested in facilitating communication, not just with us, but with other entities, whether that be other institutions or the business community. They see a greater role for the commission to play in that communication. The other area is collaboration, and that really, I think, is a recognition that going forward creates an opportunity, but also a challenge to be doing this work in a deeper way than what perhaps we have understood the word collaboration in the past. Collaborative programs. We're going to hear about one later in this meeting. Collaborative services, collaborative student support, all kinds of ways in which I think the community colleges are saying, can you help us create those collaborative models that might help us and support those collaborative models? And I think we'll get back to it at the end of this, but I think we're as a commission, not only how do we help, but also are there ways in which that our current policies and even funding strategies get in the way of that collaboration? I think we're going to want to look at that. Some very specific areas, because of the ways in which our funding model works for community colleges, they have a difficult time, especially the smaller ones, have a difficult time coming up with the resources necessary for program startup or program redevelopment. And so while they have a desire to create a stronger connection between their educational opportunities that they provide and the needs that their communities have, they frequently come up against the economic challenges of what does it take to build that program? Because I think most of us are aware the funding for that program is related to FTE, and we don't actually get the credit for that FTE for an extended period of time after the program. And so thinking about, are there ways in which we can address that specific issue? Number of the schools, this is a reoccurring issue, how do we address the capital construction needs of our institutions, especially those that have been unable to find a strategy for providing the required match for state funds. So we see, I think as Sandy has always represented, we see significant facilities needs from institution to institution. They're not the same, but they are there. And I do want to note that this past week I actually saw the movie The Brutalist, and after all this time, I have weirdly developed at least a little bit of an appreciation for that architectural style. So I know, what can you say? I think the one other area that's really significant to the community college, and perhaps all the schools, but more so to the community colleges, is our funding is based on, of all of our institutions, is based on FTE. And so we in a sense, that means we pretend we're always funding full-time students. But there are, you know, when it comes to wraparound services or support services, advising, things like that, there's not much difference in cost between supporting a part-time student and a full-time student. And so where we have institutions which are not only the population they serve is significantly shifted towards part-time, those schools are seeing expanded needs in order to support those students. And our current funding model doesn't really take into consideration that. And so the last thing I'll say with regards to that is that I think the community colleges have, although they don't agree on how, they have a considerable interest in us having a discussion about not just how much they're funded, but how we distribute those funds. And I think that that is a role that we as a commission play, and I think that's something that we're going to have to look at. So I'll hand it back to you, Sandy. Sorry.
That's all right. Thanks. Okay, now we've had some conversations with each other and with Ben, and sort of reflected on all of their needs, which are accurate, and the current times we are in. And it's not just there's a tight budget in Oregon, because there is, and we've never been a wealthy state, and we've never been a state that, in our opinion, has prioritized higher education enough. But at any rate, that is our circumstance. And then you layer on top of that both the economic uncertainty overall nationally and the policies that are being enacted. And it's impossible to say we can just go along and do bit by bit. As Helen said, the incrementalism won't work. We need to look at some bigger things. And what I'd like to say starting off is that Greg and I both came away committed, as we are, as the system states, to local and independent governance, especially at the universities. At the same time, it's very clear that we need much more coordination and leadership from HECC. This is a song you've heard me sing the entire time I've been chair, and it is more true today than it was when I first started stating that. So we have to function as a state system. That's in Oregon, that'll be a little c, not a capital C, but we are not functioning as a state system now. We're not merely a collection of colleges and universities, and big things that happen at one school in Oregon affect another school, affect what programs it can offer, affect enrollment, especially now with online enrollment. We certainly are not primarily a pass-through for funding. We made promises as a group in our strategic plan and goals, largely to students, of the things we were going to improve. And what I would like to emphasize in closing is that we can't improve enough if we are not willing to change some of the structures and relationships within the system and at the universities. Yes, we are a coordinating commission. We're the connective tissue between the schools, and we certainly need to work more effectively between the institutions. But we're interested, for the benefit of all the students, we are interested in greater coordination than we have gotten so far. We believe that we need the higher education institutions we have now. I mean, it's impossible, I will tell you, to go to LeGrand and to see what they are trying to do at Eastern and to not believe how essential that is for that community. I mean, just one data point, they never have a sports game. They never have a arts program they put on that isn't a sellout, because that's how much the community depends on the offerings of the university. So yes, it's financially struggling now, but having it go away is not an option. It's the same thing. I mean, you hear in the news and everywhere people saying that you can't have a strong Portland without having a strong Portland state. That's absolutely true. Their futures are linked together. And so that's a responsibility I think we need to feel as a commission that for all of these schools to be successful, we need to help initiate greater change within them. This would be true even without the pressure or the uncertainty of the federal government's actions, but it is even more certain today. We need to, this is apparent, I think, we need to lead change in a coordinated fashion so that we can produce more impact and greater results with whatever resources we have. Not the resources we wish we had, not the resources the schools wish we had, but the resources we have. HECC staff in the months ahead are going to be leaning into this with Ben's leadership, and I'm asking the commission to do the same. Yes, we will continue to fight as hard as we can for every dollar we can from the state, but the truth is we have to face reality, and we can't expect to get significantly more resources every biennium. I'm going to go out on the limb a little bit further. When I first took over as chair, actually, I think that we've had so much turnover, very few of you were there. But I had a lot of statistics. I talked, as many people have, about the pressures on higher education, everything from public opinion to resources. And I feel like that conversation nationwide has been repeated and repeated and repeated. Ben yesterday helpfully gave me some statistics, and we've used them. We've looked at statistics from Washington and California and how much more aid they have and our lusting for that. But when you boil it down and really try to look at, okay, what has state funding done? Just that one thing. What has tuition done? How is that? And what has enrollment done? These aren't the only important data points, but they're three damn important data points. So here you go. In the last decade, in which the Consumer Price Index has increased 19% for community colleges in Oregon, state funding has increased 71%. Tuition rates have increased 48%, and enrollment has declined 37%. For the public universities, state funding has increased 91%, tuition rates have increased 60%, and enrollment has declined 6%. So those just kind of caught me at, okay, this, if you're looking at this from the outside and those are the statistics you see, then you don't feel good directionally about where we are headed. And we know, we've seen it. Many of our institutions, especially some of the regionals, are struggling financially. They have structural deficits and they have declining fund balances. So in the decade to come, I would say it would be overly optimistic to expect state funding to continue at the rate that we've seen, to go up 91% or 71%. And I think we have to be realistic. I want to be optimistic, but I think we have to be realistic and just say that's not likely to happen. I feel the same way. This is just my opinion about tuition. It can't continue to increase at this rate. We've said it over and over in every possible context, but higher education as a whole tends to do very little about this, including in Oregon. The rate of increase in what students and families need to pay for higher education just isn't sustainable. And that's no longer a newsflash. It hasn't been a newsflash for a long time. It's just a fact at this point. Demographics, of course, aren't in our favor. We are unlikely to have any kind of upswing that's helped by demographics. Even if it happens at the community colleges, that probably just means we're in a recession when community colleges tend to go up. So these factors are especially acute and damaging at regional public universities, and they were quite visible at every regional university we visited. And so I think our conclusion is that the trends and the facts are in front of us. The conclusion really is unavoidable. We have to help the universities work to change the operating model. The operating model we are using at many of these schools can't continue as is. And we've had, market forces, you would think some people say, oh, well, market forces will take care of it. Well, we want to keep these schools. We don't want market forces to drive some of them out of business. And so we've had market forces, we've had declining numbers, even public loss of confidence that have driven changes around the edges. And they've also driven some really painful cuts. But the level of change that we need isn't happening swiftly enough across enough institutions. I believed that before. Now we have seen it at the institutions. We need to redefine the way we do things and rethink sort of how should we best deliver post-secondary education and training for today's students? And even Greg referred to this, even our own policies, things like the funding formulas may be encouraging actually different outcomes than what we need and want for today. And we need to see within HECC and outside what things are identify the things that are standing in the way of some of the institutional change that's necessary. And then we need to figure out, okay, how do we help lead the institutional change? There are a few thoughts that we had. Greg, you want to jump in on the types of changes that might help or that we might pursue first?
Sure. Thank you again, Sandy. I want to not really reiterate, but just to add, I think I was surprised by the kind of data that Ben was able to share with us, and even more surprised when that's broken down on an individual institutional basis. And there are just some, it became apparent to me that as much as we need more resources, we also, we're going to have to do, I think we're going to have to do the work of higher education differently in a more collaborative way. And I think that calls for a much more active role on the part of the Higher Education Commission. And just some ways in which I think that might be. One of them is, an increased level of, I guess, coordinated or partnerships or shared services, especially focusing on things that aren't really student-facing or high-touch. There are many other states that do a lot of the backroom stuff, at a more coordinated, almost state level. And I think we're going to have to look at models that take advantage of those kinds of things, and not presupposing where we would end up with those things. But I think the current situation, I think, demands for us to at least investigate different ways in which we could best serve the students and the people of our state. I think that perhaps especially, maybe perhaps everywhere, but maybe especially in the regionals where we see some of our greater declines, just thinking about, can we take a more systemic approach to serving students? Is there a different kind of relationship? And I don't want to presuppose what this is, but a different kind of relationship between regionals and, the larger schools that could help us to focus in different ways that perhaps would help us to be more successful in serving students in aggregate by performing different roles in that educational experience for that student. And again, if we were choose to move in that direction, there are plenty of state models that can provide us some history and examples of where those kinds of things have been done successfully. And I think I strongly came away from.
We've lost you for a minute.
Oh, we're back.
Okay.
Am I back?
Okay. Yes.
Thank you. That can't happen without the Higher Education Coordinating Commission playing a much stronger coordinating role. That is our purpose, and so I'm hoping that is something we will take on. We have, in some ways, talked about the challenges of higher education for a decade or so, and I think the time is now because of all the things we've seen, and things that haven't even been mentioned here. What is, Commissioner Edwards would, add to that. What's the effect of AI on how our models for education should look like? We certainly saw as we went from institution to institution, a significant shift towards part-time education, a significant shift towards online education. And while I think we've made some amazing adaptations in those areas, I think there are ways in which the whole model needs to, or perhaps could, adapt to those changes in the ways in which students approach education and think about education in their life. And it may not be the traditional sequential, I graduate from high school, go to college, and then get a job. It may be much more blended than that. And I think we're at a time in which, yes, market forces may force us to this conversation, but I prefer to think that we together take up that conversation, because I think all those things provide also opportunities for us to think differently about how we do this work. I'm not going to presuppose I know where we end up on that, but I think that what we saw at the institutions, and I think the circumstances, the pressures that I think we feel in higher education right now, really put in front of us the need for the commission to I'd say one of the values that is in our strategic plan, and I love the way this turned out. The one is, I think it's titled Resilience, which essentially says just because something is difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. And this is certainly a difficult challenge, but I don't see that as a reason for us not to take it up and see how we together can best serve the students and the communities of Oregon. So pass it back to you.
Thanks, Greg. And Greg is right. We're not presupposing, we don't have a plan. We're not presupposing anything. I think at the end of this, what we really want is Ben and staff to start to give us guidance. But there are some things that are clear. Every school in Oregon, every university, every college cannot be everything to everybody. We don't have the resources for that. It may not even serve students the way they need to be served today. So that they vary among communities on what level and what kinds of offerings we provide. After visiting these schools, though, I mean, it really is impossible not to care about them and their missions even more, I think, than we did. It's also impossible to not worry about their futures and their sustainability given the current trends. The worst possible outcome isn't losing our old practices or exactly everything every college or university is doing now, or trying to cling to past practices to have every school be everything. The worst outcome is that we don't change enough. And in just 4 or 5 years, think about it. If you have entering freshmen this year, by the time those freshmen finish university, if they're in a university, the worst outcome would be that if we saw in Oregon, we had lost more students, we had potentially lost some schools, and the student outcomes were less successful in matching what the students need today and tomorrow. I don't think that has to happen at all. It's certainly not inevitable. I don't think education leaders in this state will let it happen. I don't think you as a commission will let it happen. But it really is going to take vision and stronger partnerships and greater determination to meet this moment. And obviously, HECC has a critical role to play in this. And so I guess with this, I would ask with your permission, if we ask Ben to, he's thought about this a great deal, but if we ask him to think about it further and sort of outline steps we would take to begin to define how do we look at the missions of the schools, how do we look at the practices, how can we help further an examination on this. So questions, discussion. Ben, you want to jump in and correct anything I said?
No.
Okay, we're going to take questions, starting with Commissioner Yamasaki and then Commissioner Middleton.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Rowe. So one of the things that struck me with what you just shared was that perhaps not all our institutions need to be a comprehensive institution. And what might that look like differently? So I'm pretty excited about maybe not only knowing the data that maybe Ben shared with all of you, but also some different models of what, a collaboration or something different with community colleges and universities and what that might look like.
Good thought. Thank you. Commissioner Middleton and then Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you. I want to thank you both for this report. I really appreciated the words that you shared. And one of the things I didn't hear you talk about was something that we hear a lot about at the community college is the enrollment cliff that's approaching, and that there's just not as many young people coming our way in terms of numbers. And that's really close at hand. And so I really support us looking into this work and helping to sort of look at the operating models of the universities, look at the funding formulas for the community college, and finding ways to affect change in a positive way, because there's definitely work that can be done, and I'm fully in support, and I thank you both for your work and this report.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you for that high bandwidth download. I'm going to talk about this from an AI perspective first. There is no question that AI is going to completely and utterly disrupt higher ed. And that would be enough. If nothing else was happening, that would be enough. But we have collapse in trust in institutions. We have a complete phase change in how we are relating to funding sources and the role of the institution itself. We have potentially big changes with, skepticism aside, onshoring of manufacturing and skilled use of robotics versus people. We have a fundamental problem about the media landscape and the reality that people live in. We have a problem with, which will come up later, about just where Oregon's students K-12 are in terms of their educational achievement. I mean, these are all, any one of them would be enough to take out the word coordination and say there's nothing to coordinate. Coordination is such a downplay of the word. Like, we actually have to work together to fundamentally imagine a new future. And artificial intelligence is going to force it no matter what. We might be able to put fingers in the dike on a few of these other things, but the combination of the demographics and the AI is just so big, it's hard to conceptualize. And this is, my view is, this is a phase change moment. Things will be very, very different. There is no kind of just break everything down into the component parts, fix every one of them, roll it back up again, and you've got a new outcome. That won't happen. We're going to have to be much more experimental and much more adaptable, and we will have to figure out new ways to think about this governance challenge. So I get stuck on, there are point solutions that you can kind of think of, but the whole thing just ends up a game of whack-a-mole. And stepping back and say, what is the governance solution to this? How do we want people to be able to make decisions for their own communities? And what is that that self-authoring, that self-determination piece of this. That to me seems like the critical thing to tackle first, because without having a set of, and they may just be values or principles around how we believe the state's individual institutions can make these changes. What is it to be this network? I don't have a clear view of being what the network is now, when there are just so many diverse forces pulling on each individual institution and community.
Good questions. We're capturing them. Of course, we're taped, so we're capturing your comments and questions. Commissioner Proctor Andrews and then Commissioner Devlin.
Thank you, Chair and Vice Chair Heyman. I really want to express my gratitude for the two of you taking the time and making the effort to visit these institutions, because it is critically important that us, the people who are tasked with trying to improve outcomes for the state, actually know, and though we can't all go and take this tour, that we have eyes on what's happening and in real time and the effects in the communities. And I think whenever I am, partially responsible, I feel a responsibility for the outcomes of these students and for the state and how we view education and how we're utilizing it and its effect in our communities. And so I think it's really important, for me at least. I always go back to what is the plan? And I was lucky enough to come on the commission at the time when we were creating that strategic plan. And I'm really curious to see how your thoughts and opinions on what you saw and your interactions, how they overlay with the plan and what kind of gaps we might find there, or what evidence kind of really stands out in our values and our goals and objectives, because I feel like that's where we need to look for the answers. And for me specifically, I appreciate, Chair, your mention of needing to really be creative now, and that's in the plan too, and we did that on purpose. And I just wanted to say that's what I go to, that's what I'm going to look at, and I would really love to see how your opinions overlay with that plan, and what comes out for us there, so we can really use our time strategically, and try not to get caught in the whack-a-mole. So I think I don't know if we can ever escape that right now, but
no, we can do that. That's a very good point. We can overlay it with the plan. I think in truth, my instinct is we can't accomplish the strategic plan or even one of the things we promised without significant changes in governance and institutional approach, because we promised better outcomes at every step. Thank you for that. Commissioner Devlin, Commissioner Martinez after that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I very much appreciate the work that you and the Vice Chair have done. It does seem rather incredible to visit that many institutions over an 18-month period. It kind of reminds me of when I was first elected to the legislature, and I told my staff I was going to visit every school in my district, which even as a House member was quite a few elementary schools, junior highs, middle schools, and high schools. So I very much appreciate that. I would like to state, though, a couple of things. One is that I think we have to be careful with percentages to know the history of those percentages. I'll give you an example that's actually outside of higher ed. The state school fund was about $6.4 billion at the end of the 2007 session. In 2009 biennium, it was 5.9. In the 2011 biennium, it was 5.9. Things were so bad by the 13-15 biennium that there had to be a huge increase, or we would have had literally schools closing, public schools closing. And I don't think the other thing is, I don't think we can just look at this from a standpoint of education without looking at how state funding has changed. In the short period of 4 bienniums between 2017-19 and 2023-25, the level of state funding for perhaps the Public University Support Fund increased by 33%. The state's general fund expenditures on human services increased by 109%. And basically, there was a whole transfer that occurred in that time where education had always been the highest portion of the general fund usage, roughly being about 50% overall, including everything, both K-12 higher universities and community colleges, to now being human services. And the human services expansion, particularly in healthcare, has built into the budget almost a very significant, sometimes between probably 1.6 and $2.2 billion increase per biennium in those expenditures in general funds. So I don't think we can overlook what's happened in other areas in terms of where the state obligations have changed, or where the legislature has chosen to change the state's obligations. And
I agree. Yeah.
And the impact on actually being able to fund an adequate public education system. But again, I very much appreciate the report. I just think we should look a little bit closely into percentages and what they mean.
That's why I said that's just a snapshot.
Yeah.
Because it is. And there are lots of percentages that bear on that, but it's still a snapshot. I think that's beneficial. Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Martinez and then Commissioner Simnett.
Thank you, Chair Rowe, and thank you. I'm so happy for this report. It comes back to, I know we really do need to look at the difference in funding. Specifically, I'm from Ontario. If we don't have Treasure Valley Community College here, like, we've got nothing. And yes, it can't be everything, but we also can't just look at online from somewhere else either. That's not going to work for our rural and remote areas. And there are some some things like that too, that it does cost more to educate in rural versus urban for a variety of reasons. And when we look at, I really also very much appreciate that you're looking at the funding for the FTE for community colleges, especially when you're looking at, so if we have an example, a student who needs mental health services help there, doesn't matter if they're part-time or full-time, they need mental health services. If they need food security, doesn't matter how many classes they're taking. And so looking at that funding model for things like that, and also getting creative, I think looking for partners in other industries. We're training their workforces. For one thing, we are accessing a lot of the people that they are. If you're looking at Oregon Health Authority, if you're looking at some of these other industries, like, I think we can do a better job of supporting each other and sharing some of those resources. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Simnett?
Thank you, Chair Rowe, and thank you, Vice Chair Heyman, for this amazing report and for the work that you put into this. I think it cannot be stated enough how important it is that this guidance comes from on the ground local conversations, and it is grounded in supporting our students and supporting our communities in Oregon. I think that's so important. And I really, I'm just wanted to express my appreciation for the strong, clear words that you have spoken today as a way to help us look forward into addressing these very real challenges that are just appear to be getting worse and worse every day. But I think having the commitment of the commission and the HECC staff to look forward and to look for and to be committed to look for solutions is a great start. I'm grateful that we have a really great set of guiding values that we came up with in our strategic plan to help us with this. We might not be able to get to that strategic plan just yet, but we have those values, and I think those values are going to be very useful for us as we begin this conversation. So I am, again, just grateful that we have this as a starting place as we head off into this strange and uncertain future. I look forward to diving into this with the commission and hearing more from Ben in the future on this. So thank you again for this work.
Thank you, everyone. It is so encouraging and worthwhile to hear your comments and your enthusiasm, because this really is going to be hard work, and to see that all of us, every single one of us on this call, understand the need to really dig in here and to lean into this. And Greg, do you have anything to add? And then I'm going to turn to Ben for a minute to see if Ben has a benediction for this. Because I'm going to put a load of work right on his lap right now.
That's right, and all of our laps, to be honest. But
yes.
No, I really want to reiterate what you've just said, Sandy, is just the appreciation for all the time that, one, that HECC gave us to do these visits, and the time that the institutions gave us, and now your extremely important and powerful feedback to the presentation that we've just given. I feel greatly encouraged, and I'm grateful, really grateful for that. So that's my wrap up.
Thank you. Commissioner Middleton, is your hand still up, or is that accidental? It's from before. Okay. Ben?
Yes. Sorry.
Anything to add, sir?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I've obviously been listening very closely, taking a lot of notes, take very seriously the I think quite strong and significant report that you and Vice Chair Heyman have given, and the Commission's endorsement or support for the directions and the kinds of conversations that you expect us to be having and leading. So I will come back to the Commission at subsequent meetings with a description of how we are and how you are moving that body of work and thinking forward. I'll just confess, there's a certain amount, it is a disorienting time already. And I think your report and the directions it suggests for the Commission are appropriate insofar as we're prepared to challenge or, reconsider some of the assumptions that have guided, the structure and operation of Oregon higher education over the past decade plus. And so I'll acknowledge that sort of a feeling, a certain amount of disorientation in that. I appreciated, though, the callback and, Commissioner Simnett, who referenced the strategic plan, the emphasis on the values that I think can help to guide, right? I think, as you've all acknowledged, we don't have specific outcomes or endpoints in mind for this, but I think to return to those values and principles and overarching priorities will help create a sense of stability in what is undoubtedly going to be some pretty challenging and, again, I'll use the word again, sort of disorienting conversation. So I like more than that. That's not very satisfying. That's not much of a wrap up, Chair Rowe. You did much better, but I certainly take this very seriously.
I think the next steps, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I think what we need to do is, and Ben and Greg and I can get together and bring this to you, sort of not an outline of all of the work to be done, because we couldn't begin to divine that now, but really a sort of the charge to the Commission. This is what we need to do in order to examine structures and governance and offerings and relationships and coordination. And also, obviously we're going to have partners in this. Everybody's not going to applaud and say, oh, this is a wonderful idea. Please look at our structure again. And so we also need to make sure that we're on the same page as the governor in terms of examining things that that potentially need to change. And that's in Ben's court. So we will come back with sort of key questions and how we want to begin this work for your approval and explanation. That makes sense? In other words, this ball isn't dropping. Okay, I have now busted up our schedule tremendously. So thank you for indulging us. Thank you for your commitment. Appreciate it. And now we are going to move on. We're back to Jim Pinkert, I believe. Yes, on the technical, this will shed more light on the technical and regional universities and PSU and the financial sustainability funding.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and members. Again, for the record, Jim Pinkert, Postsecondary Finance and Capital. Do want to offer you an update on a piece of work we're doing, the True Plus PSU financial sustainability funding. There is a slide deck to look at, which I'll share, and hopefully all of you can see this on the screen. So I do want to spend just a few minutes walking through this slide deck. It is posted as part of the docket materials for docket item 9.2 and with some additional information. But this is a funding stream that we received here at the Higher Education Coordinating Commission for the current biennium. There's an active request into the next biennium, which I'll get to in just a second. But do want to just provide you with an update on where we stand with this work, how we're collaborating with the technical regional universities and PSU on this work, and give you an idea of what that looks like. This is not an action item for you, just for discussion only. But again, just want to discuss the projects that have been funded and review the legislative recommendation that we did make. But first, I want to note that of this $25 million investment, there are three components, 6.2 million of which was distributed back in September of 2023 for innovative proof of concept efforts that the universities, the 5 universities participating in this, were already working on. There was $100,000 that was set aside to engage with a contractor on assessing how to distribute the 18.7 million and to do essentially a landscape survey to tease out where we stand on financial sustainability writ large for the 5 institutions. We did, right after competitive process, a contract with NCHAMS, the National Center for Higher Education Management Systems, to conduct that work. In the appendix to this slide deck, you'll find more information about what they found in a section called Understanding the Problem, which I really encourage you to walk through that, and I'll conclude my comments with a couple slides in that. But the rest of these slides really focus on kind of the status of where we're at with the $18.7 million special purpose appropriation that was granted to the HECC from the Legislative Emergency Board earlier in the spring of last year. So the key takeaways of understanding the problem, and I think Chair Rowe and Vice Chair Heyman kind of touched on these points in a very succinct way. We do see changing statewide demographics that are shifting the students who are served through our public institutions, which will lead to enrollment challenges, which will impact available revenue. To address some of that, there is room to grow retention rates. There are adult students that we can serve who we haven't effectively served in the past. And for currently enrolled students, the largest room in the world is the room for improvement to help them achieve their definition of success. So retention is certainly part of the solution. It's important to note the universities are currently in fragile financial positions, but each of them has a unique path to financial sustainability that we believe can be strengthened through collaboration, which is a key component of what we're funding through this program. The timeline started back last spring. We did finalize the contracts for the distribution of funding just this past January. And in February, we do have a request for proposals that recently, earlier this month on May 1st, a decision was made on the contractor for that. And I'll speak to that in just a second. We have to date reimbursed about $2.1 million already of the 18.7 million. So this is great work that's ongoing across a number of areas. Just to recap, we did receive requests for applications for this funding across 3 categories, including strategic cost cutting, growing revenue, and for collaborative activities, all 3 categories key to what we see in the future to bolstering the financial sustainability of the institutions. When we assessed the 19 applications that we received, we did so using a cross-agency team, and we assessed each project across 5 areas noted on the right-hand side of the screen. The idea really was to tease out those projects that we felt demonstrated the highest likelihood of improving the university's financial position over time. And those are the projects that we funded. We funded 15 in total, totaling 16.8 million. If executed consistent with planning, all will generate $88 million in either incremental revenues, additional revenues, or cost savings over time. So we hope that there's a substantial return on investment, if you will, a big bang for your buck. We do list on this slide just a summary recap for each one of the 5 universities on the style of project that gets funded. Eastern's going to focus on high demand graduate healthcare programs that are key to the workforce needs in that region of the state. I won't read through all of them. There's more information on each of these in the appendix of this slide deck as posted with your materials. We're kind of excited about this return on investment. We do think these projects are key to helping improve the sustainability of these institutions. I do want to note that of the 18.7 million, we did set aside 2.5 million or thereabouts for collaborative activities, really kind of in 2 veins, administrative services and student support. For administrative services, there is an effort to hire a third-party consultant to assist on assessing not just current opportunities, but to, around existing needs, identify specific actionable plans for implementation, right? So we worked with the 5 universities, and to their great credit, they identified existing needs in certain administrative areas like procurement, compliance, risk management, internal audit. And building on that, the identification of those needs, they're going to work with a consultant. They just selected a vendor earlier this month. I tell you who it is, but I'm not convinced that they've actually communicated with that vendor and the others who applied through the competitive bidding process. But that vendor is intended to start work June 1st. And they're going to spend about 10 months through the spring of next year, around March 2026. And the result of that work will be specific actionable plans for all 5 of the universities to implement collaborative services to identify cost savings and improve service to their campus communities. So I'm excited about this work. It's going to total $640,000, and I hope that the return on investment will be 3-4x of what we spend. On the student support side, there's a collaborative work group currently trying to map out details of a specific proposal. There's some legislation working through the process at the session right now that may or may not impact that work. So we're not as far along in that work yet as we'd like to be, but ongoing work that we look forward to hearing more about. So I'll conclude here. Well, I'll say that our recommendation to the legislature, and this was included, we appreciate it in the GRB, of the 18.7, we think that as of the end of June, the end of the biennium, we'll have about 11.1 million that still needs to be spent. So we've asked the legislature, and they included it in their framework as well, to reappropriate the balance of the 18.7 into the next biennium so that we can continue to pursue what we view are very worthy objectives. The timeline for execution will continue through next session, and we're going to assess outcomes as we go along throughout the process. And so the next update on this work, we hope, will be relative to what are we seeing as outcomes? Are we succeeding in achieving the goals we outlined for ourselves? I will quickly touch on the appendix. I think this section is really important and may help all of you kind of understand not just where these 5 universities are, but really where all 7 of our universities are and many of our community colleges. You know, we've talked about enrollment here. We've talked about retention, completion, and transfer rates being a part of the solution, although may not be the entirety of the solution. Serving adult students and part-time students and non-traditional students in the future is going to be really important. And the institutions will need to build business models around that. We talk about the demographics, projected workforce needs of the state will continue to suggest higher ed will play a key role in supporting the economic future of our state. The current financial position of the 5 institutions, essentially, I see it as very simply, we've seen in the past few years and likely to continue into the future, a structural gap between revenue growth and spending growth. Spending is growing at a higher rate than revenues are growing. So therefore, that structural gap is what a lot of our institutions are going to have to address. Many of them are focused on that in long-range planning that they're doing with their boards and with their communities. But I think that's where likely they'll need to head. There's an Appendix B, which gives you just more information on each funded project. And I'll pause there for questions because I'm excited about this work and hope that you will too. The next update that we give you, again, like I mentioned, hope to have information on specific outcomes. Are we achieving the goals that we set out for this funding? So.
Very good start and encouraging. Thank you, Jim. Commissioner Devlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jim, you don't have to read too far into this to see that of that theoretical about $80 million in future savings, about 75 of that is attributable to PSU. Now, that would tell me maybe PSU is overly optimistic, or maybe they're not, and that the savings are modest for the trues. They may be beneficial, but they're still relatively modest compared to their overall situation. And maybe there are no easy answers in those, but it does seem like, that it should be pointed out that out of that theoretical $80 million in savings, 75 of it is attributable to PSU. So.
Thank you. I agree that even if that's the case, and even if that works, there are other benefits beyond the savings. Clearly, we have to develop some new muscle around change, and I think these actions will be helpful. Any other questions? Thank you very much, Jim. You're done with us for today. Okay, the next item we have, is the report on the Bachelor of Science in Nursing Consortium model. And Donna Llewellyn and Holly Nelson. There's Holly. Is Donna with us? Ooh, Sounds like somebody has the
Healing.
gas. The dentist office. Is that you, Donna?
Can you hear me better now? Yeah,
Yes,
is
a
that
little
better?
bit. Yes. Now you only sound like a
Okay,
12-year-old.
great. Sorry. I am.
That's all right.
Well, that's
y'all are
pretty
gonna
normal.
get.
I'm about a tall 12-year-old, so.
Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Rowe, Vice Chair Hammond, and members of the commission. I'm Paula Welly, Director of the Office of Community Colleges.
You're breaking up a lot, Donna.
During
Wait. Guthrie, do you have any advice for us?
None, but perhaps Donna might leave and rejoin, see if that helps.
Okay. And while Donna is doing that, I'm going to need to leave at some point for another appointment, and Greg will take over. It will probably be at the end of this item, or I might have to slip out right before the end. So if I disappear, it's not because I'm angry. It's not because I've decided to take a nap.
Lee, are you on? While we wait for Donna to rejoin, we might take the brief item 10.2.
Thank you, commissioners, for sticking with us.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yay, there you are. Yes.
Yay, sorry. Teams
That's
is
That's
a
all right.
challenge sometimes. Okay, thank you. For the record, again, Donna Llewellyn, Director of the Office of Community Colleges, Workforce Development. During the February meeting, the Commission approved the first Bachelor's of Science at our community colleges. The Commission requested additional information related to the consortium model and what it really looks like on the ground. And I'm happy to say I'm joined today by my colleague, Holly Nelson from Chemeketa, who will share with you more in depth of what